Hello, hello. It is Justin Colletti of SonicScoop. Thanks for joining me for this week's episode of the SonicScoop podcast. And today, we're going to be talking about a mixing engineer named Serban Ghenea. Serban Ghenea is possibly one of the most heard mixing engineers in the history of mixing engineers. Serban has done some of the most streamed mixes in history. He's worked with the likes of Taylor Swift and Ariana Grande and Katy Perry and so many of these huge artists. We've already analyzed one of Serban's mixes on this channel. It is actually the most streamed mix of all time. And that mix was for an artist called The Weeknd. And we'll be listening to some more Weeknd tracks today, some tracks from Beck, some tracks from Imagine Dragons, because I want to take a special approach with this podcast. We don't have Serban Ghenea on because even though Serban has been doing this stuff for decades, he's given like maybe 2, maybe 3 interviews in his entire time that he's been doing records. And they don't always have a ton of details in them as far as things like exact settings go. But in listening to his tracks together, I really believe that we're going to be able to hear what separates the work of Serban from other mixers. Why study this guy? Long story short, he is not only one of the most streamed mixers out there, but he is the favorite mixer of so many mixers. If you ask so many music producers and audio engineers what their favorite mixers are, Serban's name is almost always one of the first ones to come up. There's so many requests to hear more about how he gets his sounds, in part because he's so tight-lipped about them, but also in part because they really do sound good, even if you don't like the styles of music that he works in. And to be honest, that's one of the obstacles for me in doing this video, is that there's not a ton of artists that Serban Ghenea has worked with that I would think to listen to most of the time. You know, I'm not the target demographic for a Taylor Swift record, even if I can appreciate how well constructed they are. So I tried to find a few records that had a couple of things in common. Number one, they should be from artists who I can tolerate listening to and who I enjoy listening to. So that's number one. And number two, they should be from albums where Serban Ghenea isn't the only one mixing. It's him plus another mixing engineer. Often on the albums he'll work on, he'll be the only mixing engineer, but often on other albums he's working on, he's mixing some tracks, someone else is mixing some of the tracks. So we have a few examples of that. Those will be some of the first things I'm going to pull up. Here in Spotify, we've got the album Colors by Beck. And Serban mixed a couple of these tracks by himself. A couple of these tracks were mixed just by someone else. And there's a few of them that were mixed by Serban and someone else on the team. So also Imagine Dragons, a couple of their records, The Weeknd, some of their records. A lot of these are mixed by Serban and someone else. In the case of The Weeknd, it's Ilangelo and Serban, different mixes. Manny Marroquin and Serban, different mixes on another Weeknd record. Imagine Dragons is often Manny Marroquin or Serban or Mark Needham. So we get to compare these and figure out what are the common threads that separate Serban's work from the work of others. I'll give you all of my ideas, but I also want you to come up with your own. So we're going to critically listen to this stuff together. Another real quick mention here is there's another track that Serban has actually remixed, a really famous track, and we'll listen to that near the end. You ever heard of Staying Alive by the Bee Gees? I'm sure you've heard Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. That record was mixed in the 1970s, but it was also remixed in the 2010s by Serban Ghenea, and we get to compare his mix to the original mix and hear what common threads we can find there. Not only will we be able to listen to this stuff, but I'll also be able to pull up a frequency analyzer I have going here in Audio Hijack that'll show you guys a spectrogram and a frequency response chart of exactly what's happening so we can look as well as listen to these tracks. If you're here for the live chat, let me know if you can see me and hear me okay. If you need me to turn myself up or down or the music up or down, let me know here in the live chat. And if you're here for the live premiere, or if you're here in the future, then leave a comment. Let me know, what are your favorite Serban Ghenea mixes? What do you think he gets right? What do you think separates him and differentiates his work from that of others? We're going to listen to some probably 90-second snippets of a lot of these songs to get a sense for them. And let's get into it. The last quick thing I've got to do before we start listening to some tracks and just analyzing these mixes is big shout out to our sponsors. If you enjoy this content, sponsor this podcast yourself. How do you sponsor it? Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, all that good stuff. And consider giving us a rating and review if you're on the Apple only, audio only formats like Apple Podcasts. 5-star rating and reviews really do help spread the word. Also, last thing I'll say about sponsoring the podcast, you can sponsor yourself by checking out one of our great full-length courses like Mixing Breakthroughs, Mastering Demystified, Compression Breakthroughs. All of them are guaranteed to change the way that you work forever for the better or your money back. So definitely check those out. These are the most useful things I've ever done. They really do transform the way people mix, and you can start mixing faster and better at the same time with more confidence and more creativity than ever before. Check them out. Mixing Breakthroughs is the best one to start with. If you haven't done it, check it out at mixingbreakthroughs.com. Last quick shout out and thanks to Soundtoys, sponsoring this podcast from the beginning. Check out anything they make for free for 30 days over at soundtoys.com. Also, big shout out and thanks to Focusrite. I'm using a lovely Focusrite interface right now. They have some of the best value in audio interfaces out there. All right, without further ado, let's get right into it. I'm going to bring up our Spotify share screen. And as this is playing, I will start to bring up the frequency analyzer chart a few seconds into this. But we'll start with some of these tracks from The Weeknd. What I've done is I've created a playlist of comparisons where every first odd numbered track here is a mix that Serban Ghenea did. And every even numbered track is a mix that he didn't do from the same album. I'm going to take it down here to this Weeknd record, After Hours, which has the most streamed song in the history of songs on it, Blinding Lights. We did a full analysis of that track a few weeks out. Definitely check it out if you want to go deeper into it. But right now, I'm going to check out this track, Save Your Tears by The Weeknd, and we'll follow it up with After Hours by The Weeknd. Save Your Tears, mixed by Serban. After Hours, mixed by the producer, Ilangelo. Here we go with Save Your Tears. Oh, I'm just realizing I got to plug my headphones in and turn my speakers off. Here we go.
I saw you dancing in a crowded room. You look so happy when I'm not with you. But then you saw me, caught you by surprise. A single teardrop falling from your eye.
Cool. So let me know what you think you're hearing in here. What exemplifies this mix for you? Some of the words that I'm going to use for Serban's work is that things just sound so smooth to me. He has amazing low end, and he has such good control of the top end. I want to go into specifics about how each thing is balanced, but I think a great thing to do now is listen to a different track. After Hours by The Weeknd, this one mixed by Ilangelo, and listen for differences with me. What do you hear in the difference of the approach in the mix and the frequency distribution and what instruments are accentuated? Here we go. After Hours, the title track.
Thought I almost died in my dream again. Fighting for my life, I couldn't breathe again. I'm falling into new. Without you gone as well. 'Cause my heart belongs to you.
Let's jump a little further ahead.
On the floor, distracting my thoughts to you. I turn into the man I used to be. Put myself asleep. Dress so I can get closer to you inside my dreams. Didn't wanna wake up and see what's inside me.
So one of the first things I notice here is just how different the hi-hats sound when there's a hi-hat pattern like this. Serban Ghenea would never do this with the hi-hats. This is not to say that what Illangelo is doing is wrong in this mix. And there's certain records that sound like this. It's not my favorite way to mix hi-hats in this style, but they are so prominent, they're so forward, and they have such an accent in one specific part of the frequency spectrum. This, to me, sounds very different to the way that Serban mixes hi-hats. And if you actually listen closely to Save Your Tears, there's a hi-hat pattern that's fairly busy and fairly constant in it, but it's just so much more subdued. It's so much more softened in Serban's mix compared to this. And this is one of the things that I always find in Serban's mixes, is that we never get into this place where there's high frequency elements that are unduly poking out, that stick out, especially with transients, like above the rest of the mix. The high end is always so smooth and well controlled and less jagged. The high end in this one that Illangelo is doing is relatively jagged to me in the way that the cymbal hits are standing out. Listen to that one more time and see if you can hear what I mean.
I just wanted to call you and say, oh baby, where are you now when I need you most? I'd give it all just to hold you close. Sorry that I broke your heart. Never coming door. I was running away from misery.
Now let's compare that to the high end. Listen just into the high end on Save Your Tears from the Weeknd, the track we were listening to before, and listen for the way the hi-hats are handled. Now these are obviously different arrangements. The artists might have different priorities, but there's just a different way that Serban approaches the high end. Let's listen to that again.
For a second time, I don't know why I run away. Oh girl, I make you cry when I run away. Girl, take me back, 'cause I wanna stay. Save your tears for another. I realize that I'm much too late, and you deserve someone better. Save your tears for another day. Save your tears for another day.
Do you hear what I mean? The difference there in the high end? Just how in Serban's mix, our high percussion elements really never poke out above the bed of the rest of the track. They always have a space in there. Even when they're prominent, there's this depth in a Serban production where I'm not going to say it's one-dimensional in Illangelo's mix, but things like the hi-hat are so much forward and there's so much less space around elements. Listen again to the differences in the hi-hats, and this time I want you to also shift your focus into listening to how differently the kick drum is handled. The low end on Serban's records is pretty incredible. There's this extra extension into the lows. He really puts some of the accent on the sub-frequencies instead of the upper bass area, but they're such well-controlled subs. There's really this extra depth. There's almost like this extra layer. Like the record goes deeper when I listen to a Serban record compared to some other mixers on the same albums. So now focus on, I'll give you one more listen to Save Your Tears. Think about how the low end is sitting and how the high percussion is sitting. And then we'll flip to After Hours again and see if you can do a little back and forth comparison there on your own. And here's the mix for After Hours again. Jumping ahead. I just feel like Serban would never do that with his high frequencies, and he would reimagine the relationship between kick and bass here. Like the kick extension that Serban would have in his average mix, he'd really bias it towards extension into the subs. Now, of course, depending on the arrangement and the actual kick pattern, that stuff may change, but I think those are some of the common threads we're going to see again and again. Here's a mix that I want to bring up that I think is gorgeous sounding, which is Natural, from Imagine Dragons. I'm not a huge Imagine Dragons fan. I get what people like about them. They're very well executed. But this song that Serban mixed here, Natural, I thought was surprisingly well executed. Let's listen to a bit of this.
Will you hold the line when every one of them is giving up and giving in? Tell me, in this house of mine, nothing ever comes without a consequence of cost. Tell me, will the stars align? Will heaven step in? Will it save us from our sin? Will it? Cause this house of mine stands strong. That's the price you pay. Leave behind your heart and cast away. Just another product of today. Rather be the hunter than the prey. And you're standing on the edge, face up, cause you're a natural. I bleed it hard as stone. You gotta be so cold to make it in this world. Yeah, you're a natural. Living your life cutthroat. You gotta be so cold. Yeah, you're a natural. Will somebody let me see the light within the dark trees shadowing what's happening? Looking through the glass, found the wrong within the past, knowing we are the youth. Caught until it bleeds out a world without the peace, facing a bit of the truth, the truth. That's the price you pay. Leave behind your heart and cast away. Just another product of today. Rather be the hunter than the prey. And you're standing on the edge, face up, cause you're a natural. I bleed it.
Great. So beautiful sounding mix there. I've got to stop it. I could listen to the rest of this song. It's really well executed. But a couple of things happening here. There's this drum stick pattern. Sounds like, drums playing, sticks playing like the rim of a snare drum, that kind of feel. And again, the way that it is subdued, it's not overdone. There's so many amateur mixes I've heard where something like that kind of stick pattern would just be so overblown and just wouldn't work. But in Serban's mix, it 100% works. Just the low end extension on the kick, how the effects sound, there's so much great stuff in here. But let's hear now a different take. This is a song called Machine by Imagine Dragons. Looks like my computer's freezing up a little bit here. I'm supposed to get a new computer here in the month of May, so hopefully my live stream isn't too sticky for you. Let me see if I can bring back up our share. And you'll just have to hear it over my face right now. But here's the song Machine. This one is mixed by Manny Marroquin. Same album.
All my life been sitting at the table, watching them keys and living in a fable. Looks like I'm money and never left a wishing, but now it's about time to raise up and petition. All my life been sitting at the table, watching them keys and living in a fable. Looks like money and never left a wishing, but now it's about time to stand up and petition. 'Cause I've been wondering when you gonna see I'm not for sale. Been questioning when you gonna see I'm not a.
So that one is a Manny Marroquin mix. And I think you can hear along with me that just the frequency distribution is totally different in Manny's mix. Manny is also an incredibly competent mixer, and he mixed some of the biggest hits for Imagine Dragons, but just the tone is absolutely totally different. I'm sorry I can't bring my frequency analyzer back up on screen for you. It looks like my computer is choking out on today's live stream. This is my first time trying to run SPL Hawkeye in here with my audio routing stuff on a stream, and it seems to be choking out. So let's go back to listening to a little bit of Natural. And I want you to focus on a couple of things. One, the amount of space inside the mix it's just a totally different feel. The way the effects are used, like I can feel like I can hear deeper into Serban's mix than Manny's. As great as Manny is, there's this extra space, this extra width that's in Serban's mix. We'll talk about how to achieve these things a little bit later on. But I feel like Serban's mix makes Manny's mix sound cluttered in the mid-range. And Manny's mix is not cluttered in the mid-range. It's not an excessively mid-range mix. It's not too boxy. If you listen to it compared to any number of other mixes, Manny's mix is great. But when you hear it back to Serban's, there's just this extra openness on Serban's mix and this extra low-end extension. Let's hear again a little bit of Machine, which is the one that is mixed by Manny. And then we will go back to, I got my screen back, great. We'll go back to hearing the one that is mixed by Serban in just a second. All right, so here's a little bit more of Machine. That's the middle of Machine by Manny's mix, and now here's Serban's mix.
Will somebody let me see the light within the dark trees shadowing what's happening? Looking through the glass, find the wrong within the past, knowing we are the youth. Caught until it bleeds out of world without the peace, facing a bit of the truth, the truth. That's the price you pay. Leave behind your heart and cast away.
Those effects are amazing. This is another thing that is so great in Serban's mix, is the way these effects kind of bloom out and how they're separated from the vocal. So much of his use of effects, delay, reverb, there's slight chorusing sometimes on these vocals. They're separated from the vocal. Like you get the impression of a lot of effect, a lot of space, but without hearing always a distinct reverb or distinct delay. We're conscious of there being effect, of there being tremendous space, without being conscious of, that's a lot of reverb on a vocal. Let's hear it a little bit more.
Just another product of today. Rather be the hunter than the prey. And you're standing on the edge, face up, 'cause you're a natural. I'm feeling hot as stone. You gotta be so cold to make it in this world. Yeah, you're a natural.
And now let's compare that to the middle of Machine, Manny's mix.
Fate of the beast in the belly. Fill my cup with endless ambition and paint this town with my very own vision. I'm not scared of what you're gonna tell me. I'm not scared of the beast in the belly. Fill my cup with endless ambition and paint this town with my very own vision. 'Cause I've been wondering when you're gonna see I'm not serving.
And there's nothing wrong with Manny's mix, and some people could prefer Manny's approach. But I think these two tracks are emblematic of the differences between them. If you listen to most of the mixes that Manny does for Imagine Dragons, compared to most of the mixes that Serban does for Imagine Dragons, Manny's mixes tend to be a little bit throatier, a little bit darker, a little bit more mid-rangey, a little bit hairier, a little bit more closed in, a little bit drier, where Serban's just tend to be a little bit more open, a little bit more expansive. They seem to extend deeper. They seem to go out wider. They seem to be less cluttered in the mids. Now, no mixer is perfect. I'm not making Serban out here to be a god of mixing. There are times where Serban doesn't get picked for projects. There are times where Serban has done a mix and people have felt like, it wasn't appropriate for the artist. In doing some research for this and listening to some of his mixes, I heard an album he mixed for Eddie Vedder, and I'm like, those are well-realized mixes, but I don't know if they were the right thing for Eddie Vedder's vibe, you know? So some of the benefits here of Manny's approach to mixing is that things sound a little bit hairier, a little bit more muscular, a little bit grainier and grittier and less pretty in a way. And that could sometimes be beneficial. I think we'll get the same sense when we listen to Bad Liar. This is a mix from Serban, and Bullet in a Gun, which is a mix from Manny once again. Let's hear that comparison.
Wish I could erase it, make your heart believe, but I'm a bad liar, bad liar. Now
I just love the way that Serban does his high percussion. There are these interesting high percussion elements happening here, but Serban puts them in the right spot of the mix, where, in my opinion, the D'Angelo mix we listened to earlier, he didn't put them in the right place of the mix. The hi-hats were like on top of the mix, but here you have these interesting high percussion parts. They're still there. They're still doing their part. They're still doing what they're supposed to do, but they're tucked in underneath other elements. They're additional air candy, and he makes the appropriate elements the driving force of the track. Let's listen a little further in Serban's mix, You're a Bad Liar. And let's compare that to Manny's mix for Bullet in a Gun. Jump ahead a little bit. So again, this is a totally fine mix, but definitely a different character than Serban's. Again, Serban's mix, by comparison, makes Manny sound more narrow and more mid-rangey. Serban, in my experience, he would never have a kick drum like the one in Bullet in a Gun. He would never have that kind of low end. He would also never have that kind of dry, upfront hi-hat pattern being that dominant and that dry and that floating in top in the mix. That's something that Serban would put a little bit of extra control on. And to be honest, Serban's style, I mean, I tend to skew a little bit in that direction. That said, there's some great things about what Manny does. I could do a whole episode just on, the great mixers, Manny Marroquin, and do one on him. I mean, he's one of the top mixers in the world, but it is a different approach. And to his credit, Manny, he's mixed some of the biggest Imagine Dragons song. Radioactive, that's him. Demons, that's him. Here's one of the top mixes that Manny has done for Imagine Dragons, a song called Demons. But you hear the character of it. It's not like Serban's mixes. It's a little bit more aggressive and saturated and mid-rangey. I'll play a little bit of Demons and a little bit of Radioactive, and they'll give you a better sense for how Manny sounds in comparison to Serban. Here's Manny again.
When the days are cold and the cards all fold and the saints we see are all made of gold, when your dreams all fail and the ones we hail are the worst of all and the bloods run stale, I wanna hide the truth, I wanna shelter you, but with the beast inside, there's nowhere we can hide. No matter what we breed, we still are made of greed. This is my kingdom come, this is my kingdom come. When you feel my heat, look into my eyes, it's where my demons hide, it's where my demons hide. Don't get too close, it's dark inside, it's where my demons hide, it's where my demons hide.
So, I'm not even a big Imagine Dragons fan, but that I got a little bit of involuntary goosebumps in the hair the way the arrangement went. And the cool thing about what Manny's doing here is it's so dirty. He's unafraid to have this grungy low end. Serban would never have this low end in one of his mixes. If we were listening to a Serban mix of Demons, it would sound wider, it would sound deeper, it would sound like there's this big open space in the middle, and there's certain things he's doing to achieve that. But the first thing to notice is just what the differences are and which direction you want to go in your mixes. But these are some of the defining things for me. Manny can also do really pretty mixes. If you listen to his mix for Thunder, Imagine Dragons Thunder, that's an incredible mix. He has amazing low end. When I heard Thunder, I thought, that's got to be one of Serban's mixes. But no, the mix for Thunder is a Manny mix. Here, I'll play a Manny mix that sounds like a Serban mix. Let's just listen to a little bit of Thunder. The low end on this, if you have speakers that go deep, is incredible.
Just a young gun with a quick fuse. I was uptight, wanna let loose. I was dreaming of bigger things and wanna leave my old life behind. Not a yes sir, not a follower. Fit the box have a seat in the foyer. Take a number. I was lightning before the thunder.
Thunder, 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 thunder,
Thunder, feel the thunder. Lightning and the thunder. Thunder, feel the thunder. Lightning and the thunder. Thunder, thunder.
So that is Manny going in a little bit more of a Serban-ish direction. It still sounds a little bit more mid-rangey and crunchy than Serban would go, but this doesn't mean that Manny's wrong. It means that Manny has different tastes and biases as a mixer. And he's not necessarily trying to sound like Manny on every mix he does, but he has ways that he likes hearing things. Serban has ways he likes hearing things. They've both cultivated a different approach, different, if left to their own devices, a different bias as to how crunchy they'd want to kick drum versus how smooth they'd want to kick drum, with Manny going slightly on the crunchier side and Serban going slightly on the smoother side. Another mix that's really emblematic of Manny's style is this one for the track Night Radioactive. This is another one of Imagine Dragons' big hits. And this one is surprisingly crunchy, mid-rangey, very different from Serban. Let's have a quick listen to that.
Waking up to ash and dust. I wipe my brow and I sweat my rust. I'm breathing in the chemicals. I'm breaking in, shaping up, then checking out on the prison bus. This is it, the apocalypse.
Do you hear how dry that is and how explodey it sounds, for lack of a better term? Serban would never do a mix that sounds like this. And again, it comes down to just preference. So let's go back to an album where both of these guys have mixes on them. We heard the difference between, did I play the difference between Bullet and a Gun and Bad Liar? Let's do that a little bit one more time here. So Bad Liar, this is a Serban mix. Bullet and a Gun is a Manny mix. So here's Serban again.
What a thing. Wish I could erase it. Make you happily, but I'm a bad liar. Bad liar. Now you know I'm a bad liar.
And let's go to a similarly dense section in Bullet is a Gun.
Like a bullet in a gun, blood, sweat, and tears to bleed away.
Now, we did listen to that comparison, just the difference in how they handle high percussion, the difference in how they handle low end, how Manny is interested in stacking a little bit more mid-range and a little bit more mid-range saturation into his kick drum, where there is a much smoother, tighter, but deeper feel to the average kick drum from a Serban mix. We listened to this on a couple of these Ilangelo versus, let's do another Ilangelo versus Manny, and then we'll listen to some Beck, which I'm excited to do. I'm a longtime fan of Beck, although I'm not super familiar with a lot of his most recent work. I grew up on stuff like, Odelay and Mellow Gold, so I'm an old timer. But we'll get into Beck in just a second, and then I want to get into the Bee Gees, which is, man, totally different world. So let's skip around a little bit. Here's The Weeknd again, a little bit of Blinding Lights. This is a Serban mix.
I've been trying to call. I've been on my own for long enough. Maybe you can show me how to love. Maybe I'm going through a drought. You don't even have to do too much. You can turn me on with just a touch, baby. I look around the
just so smooth, so tight, yet so deep at the same time. And this is Serban dealing with a distorted sounding 808 bass line that is pretty crunchy. This is a pretty crunched up, gritty sounding 808, but he doesn't push it quite as hard, quite as gritty, quite as mid-rangey, quite as blown up and explodey as Manny does. Let's hear the track Hardest to Love, and this is another one that Ilangelo mixed on After Hours. Let's jump a little bit into it.
And what we had is dead inside. Yeah. You're acting like it's still alive, and you still wanna make it right. Yeah. I know, but I've been the hardest to love. You're trying to let me go, yeah. And I can see it, I can see it. I've been the hardest to love. It's hard to let me go, yeah. And I can feel it, I can feel it.
It's just a different aesthetic. The bottom end is big here, and it does go deep, but it does it in a way that kind of dwarfs the vocal a little bit, in a way that Serban doesn't. That he can get that depth without making it feel like his low-end instrument is crowding the mix, which is a little bit the sense that I get here. We get the sense of the low end kind of crowding the mix, and then further in the background, we have our high-end percussion that's very dry and very prominent, and the vocal, which sounds relatively small and thin by comparison. If you want to go through this playlist for yourself, I'll put this into the comments and to the description after I'm done with the live stream, so you can hear this stuff for yourself. I have the same thing here for the Weeknd Starboy. Every other one here is a Serban mix. So the first track here is a Serban mix, and the second one is going to be a Manny mix, and so on. And same here. Believer is a Serban mix, Thunder's a Manny mix, Whatever It Takes is a Serban mix, Next to Me is a Manny mix. And I encourage you to listen to these at your leisure, because I don't want this stream to go forever. I want to take some of your questions, and I want to talk about the approaches that these guys have, what some of the differences are in how they get the sound that they get. So we're about 30 minutes in. I'm going to move to Beck, and then we'll move to the Bee Gees, and then we'll take some of your questions, read through some of your comments. All right, so our next one here, I'm going to start this time with a track that is mixed by, I believe it's actually mixed by Beck with a few of the other producers on the track. There's like a whole bunch of mixers credited on the song Dreams, which I think is one of the bigger songs off of this record. And it's a pretty good mix. I like it. But when we listen to Serban's mixes, we'll again evaluate how they're different. So here's Dreams by Beck, not mixed by Serban. Just right off the bat, I don't think a Serban mix would have that kind of fuzzy upper mid-range in it. Totally good mix. Now let's listen to one from Serban, Fix Me. This one's a little bit more down-tempo, but we can still get a feel for the differences. The vocal effects are so good. And these high frequency elements like this, it wasn't a clear glockenspiel, but this high bell sound that came in, he's able to make that so smooth and non-irritating. So what I hear here, frequency distribution wise in Serban stuff, is I feel like he doesn't overstuff the mid-range, particularly the center mids. This area around 6, 7, 800 hertz is often like clean. And it gives us this glassy feeling almost to the whole mix, where it's like this giant glass orb surrounding you, you know? It's just so smooth and so big. The accent in the low end is almost a little bit more towards the subs. And his style makes other mixers sound crunchy in comparison. Let's have just a little quick sip of Dreams and a quick sip of Fix Me. And here, if you can see what I mean about that crunchiness, that focus on the upper bass in the kick and the focus on some of these crunchier mid-range frequencies that are being maybe more loaded into that area of 600, 700, 800, 1K. Like the center mids are just more forward in Dreams by Beck, whereas the center mids kind of open up and there's just this space inside of Serban's mixes. So here's a little sip of Dreams again. So this is almost blocky by comparison. And now here's the Serban mix. Just amazing how wide and smooth. Let's hear a little bit more off of Beck's Colors. This song is called Up All Night. This is a mix that I believe is done by Beck and some of the other producers on this record, and then we'll hear the Serban mix. Already, this is a Serban mix would not sound like this.
When you crack the rhythm and words I'll make you cold. When they break it down, then this world is all you know. Hands up, you're working it, and then get yourself together. When you call the dominoes fall, it's time to go. Now I feel it so
Again, good mix. Let's listen to some more.
away. I see the colors and all the kids going home.
There just isn't that same smoothness and space around the vocal, and there just isn't the same sense of size. Everything seems more the same size. Like in every Serban mix, there's some things that just sound huge. And here, this is a very well-balanced mix, but we don't get the same sense for size and space in it.
Night is crawling up to the day. I hear the birds ringing the sirens all singing. Just wanna stay up all night with you. Just wanna stay up all night with you. There's nothing that I wouldn't rather do. Just wanna stay up.
So again, kick here I would describe as being blocky compared to Serban's kicks. It is really pushed, like the transients have been shaved off of it. It's loud, it's prominent, it's got a fair amount of upper bass in it. But now let's listen to the song Wow, mixed by Serban. And just, again, different tempo, but you can get a feel for just what Serban does well. There's so much space in this mix. Check it out. I mean, that's just a gorgeous sounding panorama. You can hear what I mean about the kick drum and the snare and the claps. They're as loud as the kick drum and other elements in Beck's mix there, but they still have their transient. Even though they're super hot in the mix, even though they're super loud elements, they still have this transient punchiness to them. There's this punch and attack and detail on kick and claps here that you just don't find in the other mix we were just listening to. And it's almost like the low end goes like an octave deeper in this mix. Let's listen to a dense bit of the track Wow, and then a dense bit of the track Up All Night.
It's like wow.
And now a dense bit of Up All Night.
Just wanna stay up all night with you. Just wanna stay up all night with you. There's nothing that I wouldn't rather do. Just wanna stay up.
I hear a ton of compression on it. I hear a ton of dryness, but equally loud. Here's Wow.
It's like right now. It's like wow.
That additional low end extension that's just so well controlled. And in some of the Ilangelo mixes we were listening to, some of them went this deep, but they didn't have the same kind of steady control over the low end that we hear in Serban's mixes. So those are some of the things that I'm noticing. Let me know if you are hearing some of the same things. I could listen to all of these tracks with you, but I don't think we're going to get through all 26 today. So I'll leave this in here. Remember that every odd numbered track is a Serban mix and every even numbered track is someone else's mix. A guy named Ross Palmer also created his own playlist here in Spotify of tracks mixed by Serban Ghenea, and he has a couple hundred on here, I think, if you want to get a sense for stuff he's done for Selena Gomez, Bruno Mars, Maroon 5, John Legend. I mean, it goes on. Most of these aren't artists I tend to listen to. But with that said, I get it. The more I'm exploring Serban's mixes, the more I understand why people will hear his work compared to the work of other mixers on the same record, with the same mastering engineer, with the same producers, and just like something about it. They're just exceptionally well balanced and easy to listen to while still having personality and character. So this Serban comparison mix, I'm sorry I don't have it up there right now. Actually, you know what? I might be able to just copy this and put it into the live chat for those of you who are here live. Let me see how I go about doing that. Copy link to playlist. And for anyone who's here live who wants to load up this playlist themselves, who has Spotify, there you go. And I'll put it later into the comments and into the description. Okay, last thing I want to check out here is the Bee Gees, a song called Stayin' Alive. And there is an original and there is a Serban version. If I look it up, Stayin' Alive Serban mix. Let's go to album here. And I'll play the two different versions, but first it's going to be unfair because I always keep volume normalization turned off on Spotify when I'm listening as a mastering reference. Like I'll bring up a track in Spotify and I want to be able to hear the actual volume it is with automatic volume normalization turned off. In just a second, I'll turn it back on. But Stayin' Alive has 1 billion streams with the original mix. And Serban's version only has 4.5 million streams. But let's listen to them. Here is Stayin' Alive, the original Bee Gees mix. Now, remember, this is going to be at 1970s volume level. So we are going to hear a jump. But I will turn on normalization in just a second so you won't hear as much of a jump. Here we go. Stayin' Alive, original mix, not Serban.
Well, you can tell by the way I use my walk. I'm a woman's man, no time to talk. Music loud, women walk, being kicked around since I was born. Never tolerate, it's okay, and you may look the other way. But we
Man, how much little compression there is by today's standards on this.
try to understand. The New York Times are big on man. Whether you're a brother or whether you're a mother, you're staying alive, staying alive. Feel the city breaking and everybody shaking, and you're staying alive, staying alive. Staying alive, staying alive. Staying alive.
You know it's a good track when it's hard to stop. Okay, here's Serban's mix. It will be louder.
2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3.
Well, you can tell by the way I use my walk. I'm a woman's man, no time to talk. Music loud, women warm. I've been kicked around since I was born. I never tolerate, I'm okay, and you may look the other way, but we can try to understand. And New York Times don't make no man. Whether you're a brother or whether you're a mother, you're staying alive, staying alive. Feel the city breaking and everybody shaking, and we're staying alive, staying alive. Staying alive, staying alive. Staying alive. When you walk.
Now, a great mix. It doesn't ruin it. Here's the crazy thing. This is mastered probably to like -6 LUFS in the loudest sections. That's the levels that Serban is normally shooting for in his mixes. These are loud, contemporary pop style mixes, but it still sounds punchy. That's the amazing thing about so many of Serban's mixes, is he's able to get the kind of level that we expect out of modern pop productions without them sounding crushed, while preserving some of the transient articulation and punch on low-end instruments, on his kick, on his snare, without making his vocals sound pinched, without making the mid-range sound cluttered, and his use of an exploitation of the stereo field is gorgeous. He's doing a 70s-ish thing here. If you listen to the original mix of Staying Alive, it's kind of wide, and they make unconventional panning decisions. And Serban is respecting that, and he's allowing there to be unconventional, for today's standards, panning decisions in his mixes, in his mix of Staying Alive. But one of the most emblematically Serban thing in here is in the right-hand side. There is, what is this, a triangle and a hi-hat? I'm trying to remember what the high percussion element is. There's high percussion in the right-hand side. 2 elements, both of them. The hi-hat's one and the other might be a triangle. And they're so bright, but he smooths them out enough and he brings them down enough that they're never annoying, that they do their job. They give the song the pulse it's supposed to have without ever sounding irritating or like it's sitting on top of the mix. Listen to the high percussion on your right-hand side. You can follow the entire pattern. Let me back up just a tiny bit so we can hear it where the track isn't as big yet. That right-hand percussion does everything it's supposed to do without being prominent. It completely changes the feel of the track. And if you muted it, you'd be like, something's wrong. This track's missing something. But it's there. Here it is earlier on. Man, it's just so well balanced, even though they're making weird stereo decisions where this track to me feels left heavy. Like there's more low-end information in the left than in the right, but it still works and it still feels balanced. Let me go into preferences here, turn on volume normalization, see if we can get more of a fair back-to-back comparison here. I hope this doesn't turn down my level like dramatically. But right here, normalize volume, let's turn that back on. We have it on very high streaming quality, okay. And now let's switch back over to our album and let's hear a little bit more of Staying Alive, the original mix. Man, I'm going to have to turn this up, aren't I? Let me see if I can go into audio hijack and do that. Let's turn on. Let me boost the level here. Oh, it's not going to let me do it. I know what I can do. I can go into loop back and turn it up. There, I tried to turn it up a little bit, but it's hard, even with volume normalization on, and even with me jacking up the level of my Spotify output, still sounds way quieter. Let's see if with volume normalization on, if it's really taking and if it'll turn down Serban's mix a little bit. Here it is. So that is Serban's incredibly loud mix compared to the original, turned way down. So it's about the same level as the original, and it still works, right? This does not sound to me lower fire, like we're losing a lot to get this mix super hot. If anything, I'm hearing mostly benefits to the modern ear of there being what a modern listener would find an appropriate amount of compression on the vocals. The vocals are just more controlled. There's a more steady arc to the sound of the vocals. They don't pop out on certain words or phrases as much. It's just a more even, smooth sounding mix. And the pulse is honestly possibly even better.
1, 2, 3.
I mean, it still sounds like a 70s record, but better. Here's the original Staying Alive, but turned up in volume. I'll turn up a little more.
Well, you can tell by the way I use my walk. I'm a woman's man, no time to talk. Music loud, women more being kicked around since I was born. Never tolerate, it's okay, and you may look the other way, but we can try to understand. The New York Times are big on man. Whether you're a brother away, you're nothing, staying alive, feel the city breaking and everybody shaking and staying alive.
I mean, there's something a little bit more gentle and soft and pillowy about the original that's also nice, but the fact that Serban can get his that loud and that, limited without really losing the spirit of the song, without feeling like we're eviscerating the transients, without feeling like we're losing all the punch, that takes great skill, I think. So great respect to him for all of that. Let me know your comments. What are some of your favorite mixes here? I apologize for the little bit of hangups we've had on the live stream today, dropped frames and the picture not looking as good as it could. I am getting a new computer this month, but I've been debating around what kind of computer we can get. If you're still here on this live stream now at this point, we're friends. So give me some advice. What would you recommend that I get for a computer? I've been planning to order one for like the past 2 weeks, and my finger's like hovering over the button, but I'm like, man, should I go and get a Mac Pro? It seems excessive. All I'm doing is 2-track mastering and live streaming. I don't need to open gigantic 150-track sessions on the streams, so I don't want to go for the fanciest computer. But is a Mac Studio enough? Can I just get a Mac Studio? Will I be good there? Let me know in the comments or in the chat if you've gotten this far and you're a friend of the podcast, what you think I should get for a computer for someone who's mastering, doing live streaming, and rarely, if ever, editing video these days because I want other people to do it for me because I honestly hate editing video, which is why I'm doing live streams. All right. So now we can talk a tiny bit about Serban's approach. Big shout out and thanks to Geely Music for becoming a member of the channel. You too can be a member of this channel. Click the join button down below. You get access to live streams. I got some comments here about video being laggy. Yeah, it was laggy in the beginning. My apologies there. There's so many comments that have come in here from people enjoying this live stream. So apologies for those little hangups there at the beginning. Do you guys have questions about his approach or about how he uses plugins? One thing I do have pulled up here is the couple of interviews that he's done. I don't know. We're already an hour into this live stream. Maybe I should cut it here. But I have here pulled up some of, I think, the most interesting things from the interviews that both Serban and his assistant, or his engineer, you could say, John Haynes, have talked about. John Haynes is basically his assistant or his engineer on many of these mixes. He mixes in tandem with his engineer, John Haynes, but Serban is making kind of all the creative decisions here. So I wanted to just give you a couple of the things that really stood out to me from some of the interviews. And this is going to be relatively non-technical stuff because the plugins, you can look up Serban's list of plugins. There's all these plugins that are 20 years old. He's doing this mix completely in the box, doing some of the most acclaimed work in the universe. They don't sound digital to me. If anything, sometimes they sound more like what you think analog sounds like compared to some other mixers. So a couple of things here that stood out to me from John Haynes, his assistant/engineer, what he said about the things that really make a mix work. He says that your song should be arranged like a triangle. Add more parts as the song goes along. Your automation within the chorus can also follow that triangle model. Ramp up effects so that they build through the chorus. I would definitely be doing automation to make each chorus a bit bigger than the one before. This can be effects, volume rides, and there's a lot of productions that are using EDM pumping kinds of choruses these days to add excitement. You can try that. But you can do things like have drums in the chorus hit the compressor harder than the verses so they don't go up in level, but they crush and densify a bit more. The same can go for the whole song in the chorus into the master fader. So that was something I thought was interesting. Another thing I thought was interesting is that their turnaround time for mixing. Serban and his team there, they do the bulk of the mixing on day one, they leave it overnight, revisit on day two, and if it's in good place, they send it off. But John says that every time before he sends something off, he gets a bit of imposter syndrome, and it can be hard to send off the mix. These are the people at the top of the game, still having imposter syndrome about their mixes and being nervous sending them off to the clients. So that's something definitely worth noting. None of the reverbs or delays they use are especially crazy or exciting. I mean, the list of what they're going into, and I can spend so much time going through the highlights here, but they have the kind of template chain that I'd recommend that you set up. They have 3 reverbs pulled up for every track, a longer cathedral-like reverb. And we hear that a lot in these mixes. And to me, it must be a dark sounding reverb because we don't really hear this excessive top end. We get the sense of space in their mixes without getting a sense of there being reverb. So my guess is this would be a fairly dark cathedral. He says it might be 3 seconds long, 30 millisecond, more like a cathedral. And then they have a shorter one, 1.8 seconds, maybe 20 milliseconds. I imagine that means pre-delay, more like a wood room. So they kind of have a shorter room reverb and a larger cathedral reverb. These are very much unlike plate reverbs and very unlike chamber reverbs too. So I think that's some of the space they get comes from these reverbs, but they also have what I think is a reverb that would be perfect for this style, the EMT 250. This is a digital plate reverb that I actually like better than the analog EMT 140 reverbs. This is like the quintessential 1980s plate reverb. This thing is gorgeous. It looks like R2-D2. They sound awesome. That's my favorite digital reverb of all time. So they have those 3 reverbs in the template, and they're going between those 3. But they also lean heavily into delay. Quarter note delay, eighth note delay, dotted eighth note delay, and half note delay are just there. So they can either bring them in proportion or just do throws to them. But their use of effects, it's like there's a lot of effect without us hearing the effect. So to me, that means EQing effect returns really well. Getting rid of excessive bottom and getting rid of excessive top end. There's not a lot of upper mid-range and high frequencies, to my ear, in the kinds of delays and reverbs they're using. And that's what allows them to get so much space without their effects sounding so apparent. They talked a little bit about the mix bus. They'll use 4 or 5 plugins on the mix bus, and they put that stuff on at the beginning of the mix into one mix bus chain. It's in the very beginning because they believe in mixing into the compressor and the limiter. And I agree with that. If you're going to mix into a mix bus, mix into it. Let all of your decisions be informed by it. So they'll have one stage of compression doing 1 to 3 dB of compression, and another stage that does combined compression and limiting of 1 to 2 dB at the end. And they'll often use the MIC DSP ML4000. It doesn't really matter which one you use, but it is a multiband compressor that they put on their mix bus for overall multiband shaping. And they use similar settings on all the bands, and they use it to fill in the holes. This I absolutely for getting this style of mix where I want things to sound really smooth and really well controlled when I'm mastering, and I want to take things more in this direction from a mix that doesn't already sound like this, a multiband compressor doing that same kind of thing is definitely part of it for me. So I can absolutely hear why a little bit of multiband compression on the mix bus would be a thing for them. And then they like the Ozone stuff in general. They use, in particular, the three things I use from Ozone: their EQ, their imager, and their tape. On pretty much every master I do, I have the imager and the tape loaded up as options at the very least. And I gotta say, the Ozone tape emulation is one of the more frequent ones I use. Maybe I like it so much because I have an ear that wants me to do Serban-y like things. Like, left to my own devices, this is the general direction I like to take things in. If someone says, make a master sound any way, which way it should, like the direction I would veer in is in this Serban direction, where we have bottom end that's big but controlled and still has attack on it, a mid-range that's uncluttered, doesn't have excessive center mids, and a top end that's really smooth. And some of their tape presets are great for this. Also, their imager can really help get this, the kind of width they get, where we're spreading things out to the sides, and it actually leaves a little bit of a hole in the middle in a pleasant way. And there's definitely been times where people have given me Serban references, and I'm supposed to master, and I end up using a little bit more imager of the Ozone imager than I'd expect to on the average master. So that totally makes sense to me. They used to have a hardware 33609 compressor on the master fader, but they took that off. And the final mix is printed through the limiter and sent to mastering. And they have their final mix pretty much sounding mastered at the level that a final mix basically should be. So those are some of the interesting takeaways. Those are all like breaking rules. Those are things you're not supposed to do, right? You're not supposed to mix into a multiband compressor. You're not supposed to mix into a limiter. At least that's what they say. But what I've found is in all of the best mixes that I get to master, they sound like finished records by the time that I get them, and I do the least to them. And in those records where people give me references of like major hit tracks that sound like Serban's mixes, and they're like, can you make our record sound a little bit more like this? I do all of those kinds of things on the master. Like, my ideal for mastering is to do half dB and 1 dB changes and just subtly tweaking a mix, and that's it. But every once in a while, people are like, my mix sounds like this, and we want it to sound like this. And they'll give me a Weeknd track as a reference that was mixed by Serban. And I'm like, okay, well, now I have to do all the things that you were afraid to do when you were mixing. And I'll give you a version that takes it in that direction. And there are significant cuts when I'm doing that to lows, low mids, and center, not lows necessarily, but low mids and center mids, sometimes cutting the low bass sometimes cutting the upper bass relative to the low bass. That gets us in a more Serban-y direction. If we're cutting upper bass frequencies, above 80, between 80 and 200, cutting that stuff relative to our sub bass, 60, 70, 50, bringing up subs compared to lows, assuming that that's the way in which it's imbalanced, can take us in that direction. Cutting the obvious low mids and mids that people would expect, 250, 500 hertz. Yeah, but also that area around 600, 700 hertz. Something in there can give us that kind of clarity and openness that's in these Serban mixes. And something like the stereo imager from Ozone, I'll use bits of that to kind of widen things out. And they're doing apparently some of that in mixing, which is allowed if it sounds good. Be careful of setting it too far and try to get most of your width from panning decisions, because Serban's also making good panning decisions. He's not just relying on the imager to do it all for him. So that's another thing. Most of your width should come from those panning decisions. But then secondarily, stereo imagers give this hole in the middle and this stretched sides impression. And then the tape simulation, I'm often using that Ozone tape simulator. I have others. I have the UAD ones. I have the Plug-in Alliance ones, and I'll swap out certain ones on certain tracks. But I guess I have similar tastes in the tape simulators to those guys. And in special cases, like, I don't put multiband compressors on everything in mastering, but when I'm going for the kind of sound that I think is emblematic of Serban sound, it would not be uncommon at all for me to use multiband compression to make sure that we don't have a situation where our compressors are just clamping down the kick drum. So every time the kick drum hits, the whole rest of the mix clamps down. It can actually make your kick drum sometimes sound louder, because your other possibility here is you use a side chain so your compressor doesn't compress on kick drum hits, but then your kick drum pokes out relative to everything else. So using a multiband compressor sometimes helps us get this situation where we have really loud but really well-controlled low end, where traditional compressors have trouble with that. I'm inclined to either use a multiband compressor or dynamic EQ to get that effect. In mastering after the fact, where I want to be more targeted, I'll often do it with a dynamic EQ because I can be more precise with what I'm compressing with a dynamic EQ, but multiband compressors also work. But that idea of having a little bit of compression happening on all of the bands, a dB or two, and mixing through that, that's allowed. Now, these are more advanced techniques, and should you start that way? Could you do more harm than good with all that extra processing? Yes. But could you learn to use it like Serban to make your stuff sound amazing? Yes, you're allowed to break all of those rules and do all the things in the magazines and the websites and the forums and the beginner videos and the YouTube people tell you you're not supposed to do. So it's all allowed. All right, well, I hope this one was being useful for you. Again, apologies for the video hang-ups and lags at the beginning of the stream. I will try to get this new computer in here soon. Give me advice. Tell me what kind of computer should I get. Can I get a Mac Studio? Do I have to get one of the Mac Pros? I have the money, but I'm also frugal. So I don't want to overbuy on a computer, but I got to get one in here for the next stream because I want to do a lot more of these. I want to take deep dives and deep looks at a whole bunch of major producers and engineers. I would love to do one for Steve Albini, who recently passed away, Manny Marroquin, Mark Needham. We could do one on Michael Brower, really get a sense for what these people's mixes sound like, what separate them from the competition, what we can learn from their approach, and how you can use the exercise of listening to other mix engineers to come up with your own vibe and your own approach. Well, thanks for hanging out with me. This has been Justin Colletti of SonicScoop. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the SonicScoop podcast. If you want to go super deep, click that join button down below to become a member or check out one of our great full-length courses. If you want to transform the way that you mix forever for the better, check out Mixing Breakthroughs at mixingbreakthroughs.com, Compression Breakthroughs, EQ Breakthroughs, Mastering Demystified. They all change the way that you work forever for the better, guaranteed, or your money back. So check them out. Most useful thing I've ever done in my entire life. Big shout out and thanks to you for hanging out with me for this week's episode. This has been Justin Colletti of SonicScoop. See you next time.